Hello and welcome to Williams & Mullen's Benefits Companion, a podcast that helps employers navigate the complex legal challenges of managing their employee benefit plans. This episode is part of Williams & Mullen's COVID-19 Comeback Plan programming, where we share specific tips and best practices that can help businesses expand their customer base, increase their value, decrease costs, mitigate risk, and more. I'm your host, Brydon DeWitt, and today we'll be discussing the employee benefits ramifications of furloughs and layoffs.
Due to the COVID-19 crisis, many businesses are unfortunately dealing with issues with containing costs. And one of the ways that many businesses are trying to contain costs is considering furloughs and layoffs. If a business implements a furlough or a layoff, those types of reductions have impacts on employee benefit plans. And so first of all, it's important to understand the difference between a furlough and a layoff. There are no real legal definitions for these terms, and people use them in different ways. For purposes of today, a furlough means a temporary unpaid leave of absence during which the employee remains on the employer's W-2 roster with no separation from employment. So the employee basically has a reduction in hours. It could be to zero or it could be a drastic reduction in hours, but the employee remains on the books as an employee. A layoff, on the other hand, is a complete termination of employment with a possible expectation that the employee will be rehired when economic conditions improve. And so with that, let's talk about the differences between a furlough and a layoff on employee benefit plans. Most employers sponsor a 401k plan as a way to provide retirement benefits to employees. Whether an employer conducts a furlough or a layoff has different implications for a 401k plan. For example, the right to receive distributions. A furlough, because employees are not terminating employment, the furlough in and of itself is not a reason for an employee to receive a distribution from a 401k plan. So there may be coronavirus-related distributions under the CARES Act. There may be hardship withdrawals available. There may be loans or age 59 and a half withdrawals, but those are all in-service distributions. A furloughed employee, however, is still an employee and has not had a severance from employment and therefore cannot take a distribution on account of a severance from employment. A layoff, on the other hand, the employment relationship has ended, and so employees will have the right upon layoff to take a distribution of their entire account balance from the 401k plan. Elective deferrals, so employee contributions to the plan. If employees are continuing to receive wages of some sort during a furlough, and those wages are under the definition of compensation under the terms of the plan, then employees could continue to make elective deferral contributions from that compensation. If the compensation is reduced, you need to be careful that employees may not want to continue to make elective deferrals from the 401k plan. But if they have an election in place and they're still receiving some comp, if they're taking a percentage of their compensation and using that as a contribution to the 401k plan, unless they take an action to stop those contributions, the contributions would continue. For a layoff, the employee relationship has ended. There's no additional compensation. And so, of course, there are no continued elective deferrals under the plan in the event of a layoff. What about employer non-elective contributions? So if the employer has a contribution or a profit-sharing contribution, whether employees receive those contributions upon a furlough or a layoff depends on the terms of the plan. So in both cases, employees are no longer accruing hours of service. So whether they attain a year of service under the plan will be impacted by the reduction in hours, either by a layoff or a furlough. And then how non-elective contributions are contributed to the plan will also impact whether the extent to which employees can receive those contributions. If contributions are allocated on a payroll by payroll basis, then the employees, up until the moment that they stop having payroll or stop being employed, the contributions would end. Other plans, however, have a last day of the plan year rule. And so if an employee has been laid off and not employed on the last day of the plan year, the employee would not receive the employer contribution for the year. Let's turn to group health plans, where the answers are a little less clear for group health plans. If an employee is laid off, if the employment relationship has been completely severed, and the employee was enrolled in the employer's group health plan, then the employee and the employee's covered dependents are entitled to COBRA continuation coverage, and COBRA election notices should be provided to the employee. Whether a furlough results in a termination of coverage and a COBRA qualifying event really depends on the terms of the plan. So if the plan provides for requires employees to be actively employed at a certain number of hours per week, then a reduction in hours below that threshold would result in the employee losing coverage under the plan, and a COBRA event would occur. However, if the plan uses the Affordable Care Act look-back measurement method for identifying eligible employees, an employee who satisfied the look-back test, basically if the employee worked at least 30 hours per week on average during the look-back measurement period applicable for the current plan year, then the furlough will not impact the employee's eligibility for coverage because the employee satisfied the look-back, and so for the entire stability period, which usually is the entire plan year, the employee is considered eligible for group health plan benefits regardless of the number of hours the employee works, even if those hours are reduced to zero. So employees on furlough, in the case of a plan that uses the Affordable Care Act look-back measurement method for identifying eligible employees, will continue to be eligible for benefits, group health plan benefits. It's not a COBRA event. They're still covered as if they were active employees. Now, of course, if an employee is still eligible for coverage and they're on furlough, they may have difficulty paying for coverage. So the employer should keep that in mind and decide on how are we going to continue to charge employees for the coverage? If not, if we still require employees to pay for coverage, how are those premiums collected? Do we expect them to send a check in while they're on furlough, or are we going to have them catch up payments when they return from the furlough? And if you're going to use one of those methods, you need to make sure that the plan document contemplates the method in which plan premiums will be paid by employees. Additionally, if the employer uses the look-back measurement method, a furlough this year will impact or potentially impact an employee's eligibility for group health plan coverage next year because their hours on average during the look-back measurement period may drop to the extent that they no longer average 30 hours per week, and therefore they might not meet the plan's requirements for eligibility for the next plan year. So that's something to keep in mind, not only the current level of coverage, their current eligibility, but also the impact on eligibility for next year.
That'll wrap up our discussion about furloughs and layoffs. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Williams Mullen's Benefits Companion. If you are in search of more COVID-19 related legal information, visit williamsmullen.com and click on COVID-19 Comeback Plan or Legal Resources links in the ribbon on our homepage. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes of this podcast, please contact me. You can also visit our employee benefits page at williamsmullen.com/employee benefits. There you can find out more about our team as well as past episodes of this podcast and legal alerts. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when our next episode posts. Thanks for listening.